Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. WBC champion Tyson Fury has begun his training camp for April the 29th when he is expected to face Oleksandr Usyk, unified heavyweight champion, WBO, IBF and WBA straps at Wembley Stadium. So the fight, it's not quite a lock, but it's looking like it will happen after the respective sides inform the WBA this is going to happen, or they've reached an agreement. But let's just face it, it is boxing after all. Just because they're saying that they can make a deal doesn't mean that the deal will get made. But fingers crossed, let's say it will. But Fury taking to social media, and a few different clips here of him beginning his training camp and some commentary from Fury himself.
Good morning, people world. Today is the first day of my training for the Usyk fight. I don't need 6 months, I need 4 months and all that. I got 6 weeks and a week rest. Done. Happy days. And I'm going to impose my will on this little sneaky motherfucker. Get up, lads. Cannot wait. Rule Britannia. Get up. Hi guys, Tyson Fury here, the Gypsy King. Today's the first day of training camp. I flew my good buddy in, brother Joseph Parker. We're going to start sparring later between 10 and 12 rounds. George Lockhart's been here a couple of days now, ready to rock and roll. Let the games begin. Usyk, you're on a warning. You're on a notice. 6 weeks, soccer. We're coming for you. Sparta! Just done a brutal 15-round session with Joseph Parker and George Lockhart. We're in the gym. We're getting ready to smash Oleksandr the bitch Usyk, the gappy-teethed, cat, little ugly bastard. You're getting it? In 6 weeks' time, you're history. And I'll still be the Gypsy King. Come on!
So Tyson Fury there with some insight into his training camp. Although, I guess you have to ask the question. You've got Joseph Parker, who's an orthodox fighter. You've got Oleksandr Usyk, who's a southpaw. How much benefit is having Joseph Parker there for Tyson Fury? Is it more that it's early in the camp? Parker was already basically in town because him and Fury and others had been at the Paul Fury fight in Saudi Arabia. Joseph Parker, Johnny on the spot, he can help him with some of the early fitness in the camp. Is it more that? Because I think Joseph Parker doesn't really fight like Oleksandr Usyk, especially not under Andy Lee, where they've tried to sort of bulk Parker up. Those sort of speed and movement advantages that he had over some heavyweights has kind of diminished since he's tried to bulk up a bit. So it's a little bit of a question mark about how much value having an orthodox fighter for a southpaw in Usyk actually gives Fury. But make of it what you will. I'm sure there will be some appropriate sparring partners that come in. Usyk, he's in camp and has been sort of training for a while. Probably not a full-blown camp, given that he didn't know what was going to be happening, but I'm sure he's been ticking over at a certain level to make sure he's not going to be caught short. Obviously, with this will they, won't they back and forth, he can't afford to basically have been doing nothing. And although Fury says, look, this is the first day of my camp, I don't need all this time, he's been ticking over to some extent as well for some time. He's not let himself get out of shape. In terms of this whole thing, because a potential agreement has been reached, as the WBA says. So Gilberto Mendoza, its president, I confirm WBA Boxing received written communication from Fury and Usyk on a potential agreement to unify the heavyweight championship. And that's slightly different to what we heard initially when the news was broken by Mike Coppinger. They say they're closing on a deal after both sides notified the WBA they have agreed to terms. So, I mean, how close it is unclear. And why I sort of raise this as a potential point and a potential red flag is, well, we've kind of been here before. Maybe not with this pairing for Undisputed, but 2018, you had Wilder and Joshua on the verge of getting it signed. The WBA, as it has now, did then said, look, we've got a mandatory challenger. Back then it was Povetkin, now it's Dubois, and they've said, look, if a deal doesn't get done, what's going to happen is Usyk's going to face Dubois. Back then, it kind of was, dragging on forever, so there are some parallels, and it ended up being that the WBA said, nope, you are going to be facing Oleksandr Povetkin, Mr. Anthony Joshua. And he did. And that scuppered Undisputed at least then. So Mendoza in another tweet says that the championship committee will follow the final negotiations. A date would be set to receive the contracts. No date have been informed yet. So, I mean, there might be some of the more cynical among us going, well, have both sides, because there's tens of millions of dollars on the line, basically tried to push for more time and said, we have agreed on something when not everything is agreed, that they're still trying to work out the nitty-gritty, but they're close to some extent, so they've said to them, look, we can get this done, or we will. We're basically there, give us some more time. And Gilberto Mendoza and some other tweets have said, the reason the WBA boxing is outlining dates is per sanctioning body agreements on mandatory challenger rotations. Next mandatory should be Daniel Dubois. And the last mandatory for the holder of the WBA belt was Oleksandr Povetkin, and that was in 2018, so it has been a long time. Mendoza in another says, in order to continue the one championship per division policy, we have been strict in the time frame of the bouts. A unification championship of this level is in the best interest of boxing. But if it drags on, and if things don't get over the line, they will pull the trigger. Obviously, this is what they had said if they're initially. And this is what prompted a so-called agreement, or something that's close to being signed. There is no signed contracts at the moment, just to be clear, but apparently there is an agreement. But the WBA had said, look, if this deadline isn't met, Usyk will be ordered to face his mandatory challenger, Daniel Dubois. So let's hope that April the 29th is happening. Remembering, we're already more than 10 days into March, so what is it, 6 weeks away or so. That's not a lot of time for quite a big event, although I think it will sell well. But it is a big logistical operation to get a huge fight like that and certain permissions. So have they left it too late, or is all this being done in the background and we're just sort of at the mercy of these promoters and fighters who are saying stuff in public and doing stuff in the background? What's boxing? That's probably probable too. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.